Power, momentum, mass. In the world of railroading, these are the gods we serve. But on May 15, 2001, those gods turned against us. This is the story of 66 miles of terror, of a 3,000-ton unguided missile, and the 3 men who had to gamble their lives to stop the unstoppable. It began at the Stanley Yard in Walbridge, Ohio. The morning was gray, choked by a persistent heavy drizzle. In weather like this, the steel becomes as slick as ice, and the air feels heavy with a damp chill. Locomotive number 8888, an SD-40-2 workhorse, was doing what it was built to do, switching cars. At the controls was a veteran, 35 years of experience, a man who had seen it all, or so he thought. The task was routine, move 47 freight cars, but destiny is found in the smallest mistakes. Ahead, a yard switch was misaligned. To stop the train, throw the switch and restart would take time. The engineer decided on a running switch. He would slow the train, hop out, throw the lever and catch the ladder as the engine rolled by. As he prepared to step out, his hand reached for the control stand. In the dim, cramped cab of the 8888, the throttle and the dynamic brake handles sit side by side. They feel almost identical. In the damp cold, his hand slipped. He thought he was applying the brake. Instead, he nudged the throttle into not bait. Full power. He stepped onto the wet ballast, expecting the train to groan to a halt. It didn't. The engine screamed. The traction motors surged with thousands of horsepower. The massive steel wheels ground against the wet rails, throwing sparks before finally gripping the track. The engineer realized his mistake instantly. He sprinted. His boots slipped on the wet rocks. He lunged for the handrails, his fingers clawing at the cold, wet metal, but the train was already outpacing him. After being dragged for 80 feet, his grip failed. He tumbled into the gravel, gasping for air, as the Crazy Eights thundered out of the yard, unmanned, dark, and gathering speed. The yard was silent for a heartbeat. Then the radios exploded. The Stanley Yard network became a hive of controlled panic. But the speed wasn't the only problem. It was the manifest. Buried in that string of 47 cars were 2 tankers. Their contents? Molten phenol, a highly corrosive, toxic, and flammable chemical used in industrial resins. If that train derailed at high speed in a town like Findlay or Kenton, it wasn't just a crash. It would be a chemical catastrophe, a toxic cloud that could poison the air for miles. And the train was a perfect storm of mechanical failure. Because it was a yard move, the air hoses, the vanes of the braking system, were disconnected. The train had no emergency brakes. Only the locomotive's individual brake was on, but it was useless. The engine was at full throttle, literally burning through its own brake shoes in a shower of orange sparks. Even the safety systems were dead. The alerter, the dead man switch meant to stop the train if no one touches the controls, was overridden. Because the independent brake was slightly engaged, the computer believed the engineer was still there. The 8888 believed it was following orders. It was a ghost train, hurtling south at 50 miles per hour, headlights dark, horn silent, a 3-million-pound bullet aimed at the heart of Ohio. By noon, the state of Ohio was playing a high-stakes game against an opponent that couldn't think. Every crossing was a potential massacre. State troopers raced ahead, sirens wailing, clearing traffic as the silent giant blurred through intersections. Senior Trainsmaster John Hosfeld was the first to act. He and a brakeman chased the train in a company truck, tires screaming on country roads. They reached a crossing, hoping to jump on board. But as the 8888 roared past, the sheer kinetic energy nearly knocked them over. It was a wall of steel moving too fast for human reflexes. The railroad tried to use the tracks as a weapon. At Dunbridge, they threw a remote switch to send the train into a siding. They hoped the sharp curve would slow it down. Instead, the 8888 defied the laws of physics. The rails groaned and flexed, but the train screamed through the 10-mile-per-hour turnout at triple the speed and stayed on the track. Next, they tried a portable derailleur, a steel wedge designed to pop a wheel off the rail. The 8888 didn't even flinch. It pulverized the steel wedge, spitting the fragments into the grass like scrap metal. Even the police tried to help. A local sheriff aimed his service pistol at the fuel cutoff switch. 3 shots rang out, 3 sparks on the fuel cap. It was like trying to stop a hurricane with a cap gun. Options were evaporating. The 8888 was approaching more populated areas. That's when the call went out to locomotive 8392. Engineer Jesse Knowlton and brakeman Terry Forkson were told to do the impossible. Find the runaway, catch it from behind, couple to it, and try to drag it to a halt. Knowlton pushed his engine to the absolute limit. The needle on the speedometer climbed past 60. Steel hammered the rails. In the cab, the air was thick with tension. They were chasing a chemical bomb. If they hit the rear car too hard, they might trigger the explosion they were trying to prevent. Behind them, Hosfeld shadowed the pursuit in his truck, acting as their eyes. The gap closed, inch by inch, foot by foot. The blue and gray streak of the runaway was finally in their sights. Near Blanchard, the two worlds finally collided. Knowlton maneuvered his engine until it was inches from the rear hopper car. At 45 miles per hour, the two giants touched. The connection held. The iron knuckle locked. Now, the real fight began. Knowlton couldn't use his air brakes. The jerk would snap the train in two. Instead, he engaged the dynamic brakes. He reversed the electricity in his motors, turning them into massive generators of resistance. The air filled with the smell of burning ozone and tortured metal. The 8392 roared in protest, acting as a 300,000-pound anchor. Slowly, painfully, the speed began to drop. 40, 30, 20. As the train slowed to 12 miles per hour near Kenton, John Hosfeld saw his window. He sprinted along the ballast, his boots pounding the rocks. He grabbed the ladder of the 8888 and swung himself into the cab. The interior was thick with the smell of scorched brake pads. He reached for the control stand and pulled the throttle back to idle. For the first time in 66 miles, the beast fell silent. The CSX 8888 incident ended without a single drop of phenol spilled. No lives were lost. It remains a legendary chapter in the history of the high iron, a testament to the skill and the raw courage of the men who worked the rails. But it serves as a permanent reminder. In our world of high technology and massive machines, the margin for error is razor thin. The disaster was averted not by the computers or the safety wedges, which all failed, but by human judgment and the will to act when the machines go rogue. The ghost of the high iron was finally caught, but the lesson it left behind is still rolling.